If you've ever found your arps feel a little boring or repetitive, it may be down to several factors most beginner producers ignore. We'll get into these factors a bit later, but first I'll show you what we're going to create. I'll only play the first half of the song as it's over 5 minutes long, but I encourage you to listen through and pay attention to the arp and how it's constantly changing. Okay, one of the first issues that most producers have is they tend to bunch their notes up together in one octave. Here you can see how my arp is spread over multiple octaves. We've got the G in the 0 octave, another G in the 1 octave, and then a D up in the 3rd octave. So let's just recreate this arp, or just a random arp, and show you what I mean. So when I was first starting out, I might make an arp, let's say, in A minor, and it just goes A, C, E, C, like that, and that would be me done. Okay, so now the problem with that is, if you look at a frequency analyzer, is you can see how it only takes up a very small portion of the frequency spectrum, basically just the mids. Doesn't really have any bite, doesn't sound exciting and full. So the easiest thing you can do in this situation is to just start spreading stuff out. So let's move it down into the sub octave, which is A0. Let's move this one down to maybe over there, and leave that one up there. You can already hear how much nicer that sounds. It gives the arp some sub, it gives it a bit more mids, and it just sounds overall a lot better to me. And here you can see how it's just filling out the frequency spectrum. Now, one of the things I used to worry about with this is that because the arp is wide, we'd worry about phasing in the sub-frequency range. So what I would do is just go in and create a separate sub and have it playing all the sub notes. But that kind of just sounded disjointed and didn't really work to me. So the quick fix for that was to just take a utility. This one's called bass mono. If you just search for bass mono, you can find it over there. And then I just set the frequency down to about 97 over here, or 100, and that's just going to make the sub frequencies mono. So if we just listen to this, if we low pass it, let's just make a low pass here. Make it a bit steeper. So you can hear how that's mono. And without that, it kind of drifts around a bit. But I mean, I don't hear any issues with phasing, and it sounds good to me. So yeah, I like to just use this little preset to keep the bottom nice and mono. Okay, let's get into the sound design of the pluck. So when I was first starting out, I watched a few tutorials and I saw deadmau5 himself speak about his pluck, and it went something like this. Create 4 voices of unison with a saw wave. Maybe make another one, have another 4 voices of unison. Turn on your low pass filter, make this into a pluck shape, and then drag it onto here. And fundamentally, that is what it is. However, it's just sounds boring to me. There's nothing interesting, nothing's changing. It's basically just the same thing happening over and over again. Now, when I listen to deadmau5's music, specifically the song For Where, I'm not going to play it now due to copyright, so you can just go ahead and search for it yourself. But if you listen to it, you'll hear how the notes are sort of always changing. It sounds like the filter's a little bit more open on some of the notes, a little bit more closed on others. They're bouncing all over the stereo field, opening up and the filter's opening and closing over time, and it stays interesting. So we need to try and do that within Serum. So first thing I would do to make this interesting is it's fine to have this unison here, but I like to just keep one of these on one voice, and then we can spread out the other ones. Okay, and then another thing I like to do is we can use velocity to change all these parameters over time and add some randomness. So if you open up, you just search on Ableton velocity. It's a MIDI effect, so here it is. And what this will do is it'll change the MIDI so that each note randomly is hitting at a different velocity. So if you look at Serum's little meter over here, this velocity meter, you'll see they're hitting slightly differently. And we can add some more randomness with this. So here we just increase the random parameter. You can see that's jumping all over the place, but I think that's just a bit too random for me. So I'd like to just bring that down. Basically just going to copy how I had it over here, bring down the randomness, and then change this parameter. So here we can see it's sort of just jumping around over there. And let's bring down this too. So now that's nice and random. We can use this and assign it to different parameters. So for instance, we can assign it to the level over here of both of these, just very slightly. So that means certain notes are going to be played slightly louder than others. And to me that already sounds a little bit more alive and human. And then here's the big one, and that's to assign it to cutoff. And we just basically, so really subtle, There you go, we can hear it's some of the notes have a bit more of an open filter than others. You can try using a bit more of a steeper low pass curve. Try playing with resonance. Note we could also assign velocity to resonance, and there you go. Now some of the notes will have a little bit more resonance to them. And then what I like to do is assign a macro to this, to the decay, and to the cutoff. Now what happens when we open up the macro is the decay gets longer, so the notes get longer, and the cutoff frequency opens up. Might want to bring this down a bit. Okay, I'm more or less happy with that within Serum. So let's get more into the processing that I added. Okay, so in this chain, the first thing I have, let me just turn this all off. Is the decapitator. So if you don't have this, you could probably just use overdrive or saturator or amp or something from Ableton. But this, I just really like decapitator. So how I usually set this up is I'll just try all these different ones and see which one sounds best. These are just different analog models. So I think that's modeled after the Neve, and I'm not sure what the other ones are. So let's just boost a bit of the drive and then listen to it and then switch between them and see which one sounds nicest. In this case, I actually think this one sounds the best. It's got the most body to it, I find. And that's just giving it a bit more distortion and basically filling, adding more harmonics to it and just, you know, giving it a bit of grit. And then we've spoken about this preset, the bass mono, and that's just to make the bottom, the low end mono. Okay, then I add this plate reverb, Valhalla plate, and I really like this. Is probably my favorite plate reverb. And what I like about plate reverbs is they respond really nicely to high end. I find it like gives this sort of industrial metallic sound. And what's great about that is when we have these notes hitting different velocities and the cutoff frequency opens up, every time sort of a high note hits and the filter opens up a bit, that note will ring out within the plate reverb and gives a really nice effect. So let's just listen to this. Okay, and for this, in terms of setup, all I've done is brought down the mix, set the decay to 3.6 seconds, and then just turn down the low frequency. So set this low frequency, this low, it's a low pass filter or a high pass filter, to 700 hertz, and then just bring down the gain. You can see with that turned up, it just adds a whole bunch of mud. So that just cleans it up, and that's pretty much all I've done for that. And then I've added Echo Boy, which is another great Sound Toys plugin. This is Echo Boy Junior, and I basically just go through presets until I find something that sounds nice. And for me, this was this Echoplex 8ths. And once I've done that, I might just, you know, play with these and see which model sounds the best. And so I chose cheap tape. I just like the sound of it the most. And then I've boosted the saturation quite a bit. And this also really helps with keeping it interesting, because the plucks are constantly changing. So are all the echoes, all the delayed plucks. They're also changing. They're also getting brighter and quieter, and they're just constantly moving and evolving. Okay, and then I just added some EQ, which is taking out the very sub end, and then a bit of mids, just a tiny bit, and a bit of around 3K, which I usually find is quite harsh, so I like to remove that if it sounds harsh. Okay, let's bring this down a bit. All right, and then this is just automation over here. Okay, that was a sidechain compressor, but it's not doing anything at the moment. And then I like to just tie it all together with a glue compressor. And the reason for this is, if you look at the original pluck, let's just listen to it. I've automated the first macros that the cutoff filter opens up. So if I just unfreeze this, you'll be able to see it. Okay, so because that opens up over here, what happens is it tends to get a lot louder, and it can just be a bit overwhelming, and it's kind of hard to mix. So a quick fix for that is to just put a compressor on it, and you can see how it works here. So the compressor. So the compressor is just basically pushing it down as it gets louder and fighting against those big changes in dynamics. Little changes are good, but big changes are hard to mix, and they can just overwhelm people. Okay, and then what I like to do is also add other things to back up the ARP. In this case, what I added was just a very simple drone. And how I've done that is just basically, it's really simple. That's all this sounds like. So it's just two saw waves. One's brought down 5 semitones. So what it's doing is it's playing a fifth. So that's how it originally sounds. And then we add the fifth. And that's just adding these high ringing frequencies. And now that is being modulated by, not sure. There we go. So you'll see the high frequencies are ringing in and out using this LFO. There we go, it's moving up and moving down. And then other things that are being modulated are the cutoff filter. And that's moving very slightly, just up and down, following this curve. And then we've just got a bit of vibrato here, using this LFO. And that's modulating the fine pitch. And a bit of organ noise. There's also a flanger on, but is that doing anything? Yeah, that's not even moving, so that was probably just an accident, but whatever, it worked out. So the next thing I did was just to calm down the high end a bit with this and take out the low end. And then to make it sound like a drone, basically soak it in 100% Valhalla shimmer. And then I've added some dynamic EQ to this because I just found that there were frequencies, like a very high frequency over here that was coming up sometimes, and that was just a bit ear piercing. And this one was conflicting a bit with the ARP, this low B. So that just cleans it up a bit, and all together, well, those two together sound like this. Okay, and that's it. If you have any questions about this project, about the ARP, or want to know anything else, please leave a comment and let me know, and I'll be sure to get back to you.